much of the habitable planet, the Americas, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as the southern part of Africa. In 1804, the very year in which Danfodio launched his jihad in Hausa land, the British were in the final phase of their conquest of the whole of India, which the Caliphate had been in contention for. This development on the international stage manifested in West Africa as follows. In West Africa, a major tradition of renewalist, holy war, jihad developed, with the result being the creation of number of explicitly Islamic states. Jihadists were proclaimed and jihads were proclaimed and jihad states were established in the Senegambia region. During the 18th century, in the Futa Jalon region, a teacher known as Karamoko Alpha, 1751, declared a jihad in 1726 against non-Muslim elites and established a state ruled by a combination of warriors and scholars, which lasted until the French conquest of the region in the late 19th century. A similar jihad state was established in the Futa Toro region under the leadership of Suleiman Baal, 1776. Muslim teachers who were part of the broader network of scholarship played an important role in the development of the ideology and the subsequent state structures. The tradition of militant reformism reached a climax with the jihad of the scholar and reformist Uthman Danfodio of 1755 to 1817. In the area of modern Nigeria and beyond at the end of the 18th century. So by the time the British explorer Hugh Clapperton visited Sokoto in 1824, Caliph Bello, the son of the Mujahid, had become the undisputed head of the new Fulani Empire within the Nigeria space. Clapperton's visit was part of the reconnaissance for the start of the British push into the hinterland, which put the British and the Fulani on the pathway to eventual conflict. Both were alien powers who were making their formal entry into Nigeria space around about the same time. At the beginning of the 19th century, both were using the cloak of religion as the cover for imperial expansion. In each case, they would first identify and target the local ruler or king to demonstrate the power of their prayers and medicines in competition with the traditional priests and healers. Once the ruler had been converted, the work would begin to push the new faith down to the lower tiers within the society. The sheikh, that's where the sheikh comes in now. The attempt by the Fulani to push eastwards into the Islamic kingdom of Borno in the area of northeast Nigeria failed. However, they were defeated when the Borno ruling class, the Sefawas, turned to another Islamic scholar warrior, Sheikh Al-Kanemi, for help. In every detail, excepting for the fact that he was not Fulani, Al-Kanemi was a character in the mode of Shehu Uthman Danfodio. He was a Kanembu, one of the ethnic groups of the Chad Basin, who was born in Murzok. His father, Muhammad Ninka, was a scholar of wide reputation. It was his quest for knowledge that made him leave Kanem for Murzok in the central Saharan region. While with Sheikh's help, the Borno kingdom survived the Fulani assault. It did not escape the Ilorin experience. Al-Kanem soon enough became the ruler of Borno And in 1846, the Sheikh's own family had become the new ruling dynasty in the land. Their reign lasted until 1893, when the dynasty was overthrown by another invader from Sudan by the name of Rabi Zubair. In 1900, following the Berlin Conference of 1884, the Borno Kingdom was carved up between Britain, Germany, and France, with different parts of it ending up in British northern Nigeria, German Cameroon, and French Niger and Chad. The Reverend Father, the Mujahid, and the Sheikh were not Nigerians in the strict sense of the word, because the name Nigeria did not come into use until the 1st of January 1900, by which time they had all left the stage. Even so, these three characters from the three sides of the confluence of the River Niger and Benue were the local actors who did most to shape the country at the outset. Nigeria. We are currently on chapter 3. Do you think I should continue reading and finish chapter 3 before we take any calls, or I should just fold it now and take calls? Just one single comment. Let's check. That's what's done with chapter 2 now. So that's not bad, right? It's not bad, is it? Thank you. So I should continue then, right? Ben Banjo has answered us. He said I should continue. Well, another person is coming to say, Chimsy said, Odi there. Which one? I said it. I said only one comment. And that first comment that came said we should continue. I hope I'm not reading too fast. Pardon my voice, okay? My voice may not be that of the kind of voice of a reader. I'm enjoying reading it. I am. And I hope you are enjoying listening in as well. Continue. So I've got more continue now. Innocent to be Dreshon. Oh, my dear party is here. Dreshon, you are awake. Bless you, Baba. Now let's continue, okay? Chapter 3. Chapter 3. And that is Nigeria now. This is when they now talk, they will begin to put Nigeria in the picture now, okay? But to those of you who have listened in the last 2 hours, you know where it all started, Abby? The slave trade, is this and all of that, So, I know a lot of people would probably want to, one or two people might want to call in, okay? But let me continue, okay? So what we'll do is that once we get to the end of this hour, I will put a hold on it, okay? And then we'll take calls. Yeah, I still have like 1-2 hours to go. I told you it's a long read. It is a long read. Like you can listen to this, you can be watching, you can be doing something else, and you could be listening to this on the side. You don't really have to sit down there and watch. Just the voice. Hang on though. Somto, I do not understand your comment, I have to say. But when you said about tearing and sad, okay, yeah, it's tearing. And okay, I get you now. Now let's go to chapter 3. Chapter 3. 2 Nigerias and the United Kingdom of Egbaland. I remember that it was in this book that we got reminded that there used to be a kingdom, a country called Egba United Kingdom. It was the first country to gain independence before Nigeria gained independence. But long story, you go here and here. Nigeria. 2 Nigerias and the United Kingdom of Egbaland. Sir Thomas Powell Buxton wrote, and I quote, "It is earnestly to be desired that all Christian powers should unite in one great confederacy for the purpose of calling into action the dormant energies of Africa. The Royal Niger Company. You've heard about that, right? Royal Niger Company. Back in England, abolition had required a massive propaganda campaign to attune the people's minds to the evil of slavery. In this new moral climate, which the government had engineered, the implementation of Buxton's colonization project required the greatest discretion. By the clever expedient of private companies with private armies being licensed by government charter to establish the colonies as commercial ventures, complete with balance sheets and profit and loss accounts and dividends, the government was able to distance itself from the early, invariably violent groundwork for the construction of the colonies. These companies were brought into existence by command, either by a royal charter or by an act of parliament, which would define the scope of the company's activities. With the clock of such exclusive authority, the company's officers would then effectively act on the state's behalf while being answerable only to their private owners and not to the general public. In this way, the Dutch used the Dutch East Indian Company for their colonial activities in Asia. Sweden had the Swedish East Indian Company. The British East India Company was used to midwife India, while the Royal Niger Company was the corporate vehicle that was used to form Nigeria. After the politically sensitive groundwork of establishing the colonies had been done the companies were then taken into government ownership by nationalization. George Goldie. George Goldie was educated at the Royal Military Academy in Woolwich, the youngest son of a lieutenant colonel in the British Army. It was to Nigeria what Cecil Rhodes was to Rhodesia. It is said that, but for his dislike of self-publicity, the country might well have similarly borne his name. Goldians. Like, that's how much George Goldie's influence was. Instead of all of us, and instead of them calling us Nigerians, maybe by now they would have been calling us Goldians. Goldians. Like they named Zimbabwe as Rhodesia. I think, yeah? Is that Rhodesia? Until they changed their name back to Zimbabwe. Like, shut up. We are not Rhode Island and all of that. Anyway. So that was how much Goldie's influence was if he chooses to, because he's the one in charge of the Royal Niger Company. So let's continue. Yes. Before his royal charter was granted in July 1886, the Royal Niger Company was known as the National African Company. It had been formed in 1879 as the United African Company, UAC. The United epithet in the company's original name reflecting Goldie's work in bringing all British merchants' interest in the area of River Niger under one corporate roof to ensure that they would speak with one voice at the Berlin Conference of 1884. Based in Asaba, in what was to become the eastern region of Nigeria, it was no ordinary company. Not only did it have its own army in the form of the Niger Coast Constabulary, it dispensed its own justice through its own high courts. It was this company that carried out the wars of pacification. Pacification and punitive expeditions were euphemisms for the wars of conquest which the company launched against the various ethnic groups in the course of the colonization drive. State-sanctioned wars of conquest of native people through a private company had the advantage of using private funds to prosecute the wars, saving the British taxpayers' money in the process, whilst shielding the imperial government from direct responsibilities for the bloodshed. It was a politically tidy arrangement for a bloody venture. Through these expeditions, it is said that Godi managed to draw up over 400 political treaties with the chiefs of the Lower Niger and the Hausa states, which in what boxing society for the extinction of the slave trade and for the civilization of Africa had called for. These being documents drafted not just in English, but in legal language for which no proper translation into plain English, let alone the local language, was available. It was easy enough for clauses to be inserted which had the effect of committing the signatories to ceding land to Britain. Those chiefs who refused to sign were simply deposed. Frederick Lugard will later admit to the naked deception of treaties, which were either not understood or which the ruler had no power to make. The conquest of Yoruba land. The emergence of America in 1776 broadly marks the timing of the beginning of the fall of the Oyo or Yoruba Empire. At its height, it covered most of the Nigeria space to the south and west of the confluence of the River Niger and Benue, and extended further west through much of the present-day republics of Benin and Togo, up to the lands of Ga people in Ghana. Slave raids and slave wars over the hundreds of years of the trade had eaten into its bones, but abolition of the trade in 1807 brought no respite. The conflict, in fact, intensified as the embargo on the sale of firearms to the natives, which had sustained the slave trade, now gave way to the policy of supplying arms to the favored tribes in proxy wars to break up the empire ahead of colonization. One by one, the tribes of Yoruba nation, which had historically recognized the sovereignty of the Alaafin of Oyo, were encouraged. The British agents to assert their independence. The end result was a series of revolutionary wars over a period of close to 100 years amongst the major tribes, the Oyos, the Ilorins, the Ibadans, the Ifes, Ekitis, Ijeshas, Ijebus, and the Egbas. It was the same strategy as had been used in the breakup of the destruction of the great Native American Indian civilizations, when the Indian tribes had been set against one another in destructive civil wars. The rise and fall of any particular tribe depending upon their willingness to work with the foreign power, since alliance meant protection and access to the best weapons. The mission to Abeokuta and Egbas. The first foothold that the British gained following the failure of the 1841 Niger mission was in Yoruba land, amongst the Egba tribe, when the Yoruba Christian mission was started in July 1846. As London and southeast of England had been for the Romans coming in with their new religion of Christianity, Egba land, with its newly established capital, Abeokuta, served as the gateway for British missionaries, traders, and soldiers alike into the rest of Yoruba country. Being a people with fresh grievance, having been driven from their traditional homeland in what is now Ibadan by the then more powerful Oyo tribes, the Egba were ideal candidates for the role of the first partners in the imperial project. Christianity, with its message of hope and a new life for the oppressed and the dispossessed, found enthusiastic welcome amongst them, leading the missionary Henry Townsend to report to his CMS principals in England. So, and Henry Townsend sent this to his own principals in England, by the way. Listen up. He wrote, "It is a great and merciful providence that while the door of access to the interior through the river, through the Niger, is closed against us, that God should give us favor in the sight of the Akus, the Ake." Okay, so they call them the Ake, people in Ake. So, but Townsend referred to them as the Akus, by which we might reasonably hope to be as useful to the African race and eventually to penetrate to its remotest nation. I earnestly hope that as Providence has opened a large field of usefulness, that in like manner, it will provide the means and suitable agents to enter into the work he has prepared. While Crowther had been sent from Sierra Leone to the Ivory Missionary College, the Englishman Townsend had been admitted to the Ivory Missionary College in 1836 before being sent out to Sierra Leone in that same year to begin his missionary work. As Crowther was tutored in the English language, Townsend, while in Sierra Leone, took to learning the Yoruba language. The two of them, together with one Charles Gulmer, all of them ordained priests, were then assigned to begin the Yoruba mission in Abeokuta in January 1845, only for the death of Egba chief Shodeke, who had given the missionaries a warm welcome on their early exploratory visit, to cause them to delay in Badagry until July 1846. So, because of the death of Shodeke, first access to the colonizing power guaranteed a status of primus inter pares for Abeokuta and the Egbas. Thus, the first church, St. Peter's Church, was founded in Abeokuta in 1843. By the time Lagos became a colony in 1861, missionary work in that territory was still in its infancy, with the first permanent mission being established by CMS in Abeokuta. In 1846 came the first schools. Because of their conviction that education was necessary for the Christian belief, the missionary built schools for the Egba. It is impossible to estimate the number of Western educated Africans resident at Abeokuta at this time. Adding the number of returnees from Sierra Leone to the young converts made in the period after 1850, there must have been a considerable number who could read and write. These educated natives who had become exposed to Western education and ways quickly put in place effective governance arrangements on Western lines. George William Johnson, a recaptive who had relocated to Abeokuta from Sierra Leone, was a key figure here. By 1865, George William Johnson and his supporters had convinced Bashorun Shomoye and the other major chiefs to participate in an experimental form of central government. The name given to this new central system was the Egba United Board of Management. Johnson's idea was to provide a more efficient bureaucratic mechanism which would be controlled by the Western educated Egba. At first, only Western educated followers of Johnson belonged to the EUBM. The composition of the board is not completely known, but Bashorun Shomoye was the head of the board with the title of President General. Other members of the board, called directors, were selected from the educated classes, and after 1868, included some of the most important Ogboni chiefs. So Townsend was from a family of printers. His talent and training in the written word, coupled with the competence he had acquired in the spoken Yoruba language, made him a valuable aid for the Egba leaders in their communications with the British Crown and vice versa. The relationship spawned benefit for both sides. Through the relationship, the Egba were transformed from a recently vanquished tribe who had been driven from their homeland by the Oyo people into the most powerful of the 22 tribes of the Yoruba nation. Abeokuta, their new capital, was twice saved from attempted invasions by the Daomeans. At the Abeokuta economic level, Abeokuta became, at the socio-economic level, Abeokuta became the first seat of Western education through the work of the missionaries. Its competitive edge had been further boosted by the influx of educated former slaves from Sierra Leone and Brazil. At the socio-political level, the Egba developed a level of unity that was unrivaled, since it served British interest to have one paramount Egba chief to deal with rather than several Townsend several. So Townsend had taken steps to strengthen the governance in the land following Shodeke's death by arranging for his successor, Sagbua, to be conferred with the title of before all the other Egba chiefs. In this way, a clear hierarchy was established amongst the Egba chiefs, who had hitherto regarded themselves as equals. The main benefit for the British is the relationship. In the relationship was that in the Egba, they had a willing partner on the Yoruba mainland, from whose territory and with whose assistance they were better able to project their power and influence into the rest of Yoruba land. Right. So with their head starts in education. And with the infusion of passion and radicalism from the freed slaves who had found a new home in their land, it was not long before the Egbas began to assert themselves even against their British benefactors. The attempt to collect customs duty on goods passing up the Ogun River to Abeokuta from Lagos was seen as a step too far by the British authorities. When the British government, by this time in Lagos, sought to assert its authority by imposing a blockade on the Egba, Johnson and his Egba United Board of Management colleague struck back. An uprising against Europeans occurred on the weekend of 12th and 13th October 1867, known as the Ifole, which is outbreak, culminating in the expulsion of all Europeans from Egba land and the closure of all mission schools and churches. In the recorded words of one Egba chief, it was written in the Bible that Christian teachers should leave a town after 21 years, and we had been 21 years in Abeokuta, and it was time for us to go. On October 30, 1867, all three missions, Methodist and Baptist, as well as CMS, left Abeokuta under escorts. In later years, this impetuous action by the Egbas would have been answered with a punitive expedition and the deposition of the Egba chief who sanctioned it. But with the British foothold in the country not yet secure, it was an indignity they were prepared to bear for now. So instead of gunboats, they had to rely on diplomacy to secure the lifting of the ban on Europeans. 8 years later, 1875. This special relationship between the Egbas and the British arising from the accident of first contact, explains the emergence of this tribe as the most powerful tribe in Yoruba land, and also their disproportionate influence within the wider Nigeria political setting. They, amongst their illustrious sons, some of the most famous Nigerians, including the only Yoruba that have attained, in one way or another, the office of president of Nigeria, namely Olusegun Obasanjo, Ernesto Shonekon, and Abiola. To this impressive list to be added, some of the most significant socio-political figures like Fela Anikulapo Kuti, whose grandfather, Reverend Ransom Kuti, had been one of the early converts to Christianity, and the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, to the regime change in Lagos. As the British eyes had stood as an offshore haven from the bloodletting which engulfed the European mainland during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s, so too the island of Lagos, or to give its pre-Portuguese name, Eko, stood in relation to the Yoruba mainland at this time. Again, as had happened with Britain itself, the island saw its population